Did you watch the race?
Which one?
Well, this is the thing. We were treated to 2 races over the course of the weekend because it was Formula One's first trial of sprint qualifying, which meant there was a traditional qualifying session on Friday, followed by a 17-lap race on Saturday, which would set the grid for Sunday. How did you find the format?
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't watch sprint qualifying because I was at a wedding, which was, I think, better than watching sprint qualifying. I really enjoyed having quali on Friday night. I think that worked really well. I think it was really exciting. I was like bouncing around the hotel room when George Russell got a decent result in Q3. I wasn't that fussed about sprint qualifying. It was okay. It was nice. It was nice to have a bit of fun, a bit of action, but it was only decent, I think, because of Fernando Alonso, and he changed up the strategy.
Yeah, there was free tyre choice. I think there was a bit of worry that everyone would just be on the mediums, but Alonso and I think Bottas was the other one whipped out the softs. So Alonso made up like 7 places or something in the first lap.
It was such a good start.
I know, he was like 5th by the end of lap 1, or 4th maybe, and he just carved his way through. And it was just like the old Alonso was back, making all these moves, going around the outside, dipping down the inside. That probably was the highlight.
He really did have to like show his experience to keep, as his tyres dropped off before everyone else, keep as many of them behind him as he could. Like he kept Norris behind him for a while, and then Ricciardo. I can't remember who ended up behind him afterwards, but it was pretty masterful, if not a little bit on the edge. He was weaving a little bit down towards Vale and Club. Yeah,
he did have a few sort of trying to make his car wider than it was.
Yeah.
But what did you think to like the length of the race? I think it was kind of spot on. There was a little bit of a lull at the end, but I think the 17 laps meant that there was sort of 4, you could get away with the softs if you wanted, or you'd be safe on the mediums. Any shorter and everyone would have been on softs, any longer and everyone would have been on mediums.
That's true. That's a good point. I didn't consider that. Kind of my thought process was during the Grand Prix, around like the 15, 17 lap mark, that's where you go, right, I'm going to go make a cup of tea and wait until the pit stops. Kind of everything settles down a bit. So I wouldn't have minded it a little bit shorter. I think actually Alonso keeping everyone behind him for so long did hamper the racing a little bit, because by the time Norris was released, he had so much free air in front of him that there was no racing to do.
No.
Which was a bit of a shame. But yeah, actually, in terms of like, I sat down and watched it again on Monday. And it was a nice bite-sized race. It was like watching an F2 race, I guess, just with a lot less action, which was a bit of a shame.
Are there any changes that you would like to make before we do it again at a race later in the year?
I think, I don't know. Yeah, if we're doing trials, let's trial like mandatory pit stops in a sprint race. That'd be fun. Everyone's got to start on the same tyre. That would also be fun. What about you?
I disagree on the tyre front. I like that everyone was on different tyres. I mean, most people are on the same tyre, but there was a little bit of variation. I think adding a pit stop in would be quite interesting, because you'd obviously have fewer laps to make back any position you lose in the pits. Like if you have a slow stop, like a few people did on Sunday, you've not got as many laps to catch up again. But yeah, I'm not really sure. It seems weird to have it as qualifying, and I don't know if it'd be not better, but if people would prefer to have qualifying on Friday, sprint race Saturday morning, qualifying Sunday afternoon for then the Grand Prix.
Well, another thought, I don't know if this was a thought I had or something that I read on Twitter and then thought I had invented, like so often happens. But why didn't they just do qualifying on Friday? Fine, that sets the grid for sprint qualifying. and then give 10 points for first, all the way down to 1 point for 10th, and then just use the grid from Friday to do Sunday's grid again. The result from Friday's qualifying to do the grid on the Grand Prix. Everyone wins.
I guess the reason not to do that is that the way I see the whole sprint is that it's sort of another chance for you to get pole. Whereas if you've had a NAF qualifying, you're then stuck again on Sunday trying to make up for whatever happened.
It's another chance to get pole, but I think you have more to lose, as like Sergio Perez proved. He made a mistake in a race that he would argue, or perhaps argue, shouldn't have happened. I'm sure he thinks that now anyway. And it completely ruined his weekend. Not that he had a great qualifying anyway, but he had a better chance of getting up there if they'd have taken the grid from Friday for Sunday's Grand Prix.
Yeah, that's true. Have you seen the graphic that a few people have made that is the positions gained and lost?
No.
Compared to qualifying and then sprint and then the race.
Oh, okay.
It's very complicated with lots of lines. Yeah. But yeah, it basically shows how the big winner it basically shows how the two biggest winners from the sprint qualifying were the Alpines. Alonso came from 11th to 7th and Esteban Ocon from 13th to 10th. So they were probably a team that would be happy to do it again. But then the losers were people like Perez, who DNF'd after a few incidents, and then Sainz, who got sort of tapped by George, and he ended up falling quite far back, but recovering a bit.
Yep.
So there were these few little pockets of action. I'm happy that they're trying it. Looking forward to seeing it again.
Yeah.
But the whole point of the sprint was to set the grid for Sunday's race, which the drama that ensued I feel like has overshadowed the sprint debate afterwards.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, it's related somehow because obviously Max jumped Lewis. We haven't even mentioned that Lewis got pole, have we? Or have you? You might have done, and I've forgotten.
Lewis didn't get pole. Lewis got the Speed
King.
Award. And then Max Verstappen won the sprint, so Max got pole.
Speed King makes him sound like a drug lord or something, doesn't it?
Yeah. It should be the other way around. Because surely the sprint is, I don't know, sprint and speed go more together.
We had an argument on this 2 weeks ago where I said pole position should go to qualifying and you said no, so I'm not having you change your mind now.
No, I still think whoever
You're on side Speed King. This is it. This is over debate.
Whoever starts the Grand Prix in first is on pole position. But I'm just saying, as a name, Speed King goes better with sprint, and pole can fit with qualifying.
Why didn't they just say fastest lap?
Yeah, I don't know.
That'd have been easier, wouldn't it? Fastest driver. That'd have been nice.
Yeah. So the Speed King lost his crown and was toppled by the pole position winning Max Verstappen, who started on Sunday in pole position.
You really have to
I feel like that's a very confusing way of saying that.
So yeah, he jumped Lewis with his not even smoking. They were flaming brakes.
Oh yeah, there was
on Saturday
shooting out the sides, wasn't there?
And then Lewis got a similarly good start, not quite as good, on Sunday, and was basically just chasing him around like a dog. Basically chasing him around like a dog chasing a rabbit. It was like inevitable that he was going to overtake him at some point, it seemed.
Well, he did seem to get past him on one of the straights, but then I think Max outbraked him and got back ahead.
It was one of the best starts to a Grand Prix I've ever seen.
Yeah. The way Lewis seemingly had the first corner, but then Max managed to take it wide and stay ahead, and then he was right on his tail again. I wish I could just reel off the names of the Silverstone corners. But it's just the first corner and then the one after that. He was right behind him.
It's impossible. Last week for work, I wrote an article on how every corner got its name. I also made a map.
I actually think I read that just before we started recording.
Oh, thanks. I also good to know it worked.
That's how I came up with the intro.
I made a map with all the corners mapped out, and I still don't know all of them.
It's mad. But yeah, so in all of those many named corners, Lewis was right on his tail. And there were a few instances where it felt like they were going to come together before. Yeah. Was it on the Wellington Straight when they basically touched wheels and they were like side by side?
Yes, down towards Brooklands. Yeah, that was dodgy, and that's where kind of Max swept over, as you have those kind of two looping sections, and he took back the lead. That's also where you have that really cool camera that like goes across, like a cross section of the two corners. I love that. Yeah, you could kind of tell it was going to boil over, and it was either going to settle down completely or go over the top.
Yeah, and
it didn't settle down.
No. So, as I'm sure everyone knows now, going into Copse corner, Lewis Hamilton was ahead. Or was he? No, he wasn't. That's not true. They were both coming into the corner. Lewis tried to take it up the inside. Max turned in. Lewis's front left clipped Max's rear right and spun him off into the wall in a crash that was 51 Gs.
Jeez, that's a big crash.
Yeah. Romain Grosjean's crash in Bahrain was 53. So this is the second strongest crash. Crikey. So it's mad.
Yeah, it was big because he seemed to like skim across the ground. So there was no like bounce or anything to take any of the force off. It was
like he sort of hopped over the gravel trap. So there was none of that rough surface to take any of the momentum out of it. And he crashed into the tyre barrier.
There's a video on YouTube that someone in the grandstand right behind the tyre barrier took. And like, if you want to appreciate the speed at which he went off the track and hit that barrier and the noise it made, look it up because
it was a very scary incident. Like how the wheel had already flown off in not quite the opposite direction, but it had just flown off to one side and he'd spun off. But the cause, it really didn't look like a big contact.
No, but they're so fragile and they're turning already. So, like, if you had they lose downforce when they go through the corners, don't they? But they're so finely balanced. So that's what they're always talking about, getting the balance of the car right, If you have another car that's going 200 miles an hour tap you, then it's going to throw everything off, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's why you've got to be very careful when going into corners like Copse. And if you hit the driver in front of you, it was probably your fault.
Yeah. Mercedes have kind of said in the aftermath that if there hadn't been the red flag, Lewis would have had to retire as well. They said that they needed that period, that kind of stoppage period, to fix the car, and there was damages to, I think, like the rim and his front wing and things. So they were worried about the condition. So it seems, because of that, it seems insane that there's people online saying that Lewis did it on purpose and he just wanted to take Max out because he knew he couldn't win the race otherwise. Like, why would a 7-time world champion risk not finishing the race just to make his rival not finish?
Well, the crux of it, I think it was stupid. And I think that argument is stupid because Lewis was clearly faster than Max. He would have had him when they came out of Magnussen Beckett's. He could have easily got him on the straight going up towards. I can't remember the corners. That straight, he would have caught him. Eventually, he would have caught him if he could have kept with him through Magnussen Beckett's. He would have been absolutely fine. Yeah. So He would have done it on pace. He knew he would have done it on pace. He wouldn't have done it on purpose. There was no point.
No, it seemed like a slightly, not desperate, but it was quite hasty to go for the move then. There was sort of a little bit of a mirroring in the sprint where he'd kind of tried a similar move but backed out of it.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the reasons why they did come together, because Max expected Lewis to back out of it. But the Grand Prix is different to the sprint race. The sprint race, only 3 points are up for grabs, but here Lewis wants 25 to close that gap down. So he's not going to back out of it.
No.
I kind of think that's why they did end up coming together, because they both sort of expected the other to.
But the problem with it for me was that he's already tried a move going into that corner. Like, I know we love we talked about this on Messenger at the time, where Karun Chandhok is going through it frame by frame. That's fine. But if you actually go back a few seconds, Lewis tries a move on the outside and he doesn't really make it. He's made a move at that corner. Back out. Like, that move should be done now. There's been a move, there's been a defence. If you attack again, then Max is kind of entitled to defend again. And that's not weaving, it's defending from 2 of your attacks.
Yeah. The way they put it on their analysis so I've watched 2 quite interesting analysis. One is Karun's on Sky, where he says Lewis does a dummy and then goes down the inside, but it's quite a big dummy. So what's the line between a dummy and an actual move? And then the other one is Jolyon Palmer's review of the incident on F1 TV, I think it is, but it also ends up on YouTube. He points out that during practice qualifying in the sprint race, Max and Lewis had actually been running slightly different lines around that corner. So when you look at it, it looks like Lewis has missed the apex and isn't ready to turn in yet. But that's because he's been sort of running that line all weekend, and Max has been running a steeper line. So when you're arguing who's on the racing line and who isn't, which kind of comes into who causes it, they're sort of both on their own lines. And that's what makes it tricky to judge whose fault it is. I think the penalty that did come about in the end of 10 seconds for Lewis was completely fair. And like, there's a lot of people saying, we put a man in hospital, he needs a harsher penalty.
No.
But you can't base it on the outcome. You have to base it on the incident.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm trying to think of a similar example, but I think it's something that's unique to motor racing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And an example being Kvyat. He didn't get any penalty for what happened with Grosjean, even though, I wouldn't say it was his fault, but Grosjean hit his car and he ended up in a ball of flames. That doesn't mean you give Kvyat a penalty.
No. Do you think, it obviously wasn't deemed a racing incident, it was deemed that Hamilton was at fault, but do you think if both had to retire, because Hamilton could easily have broken his suspension, would it then just have been classed as a racing incident and swept under the rug?
Charles Leclerc would have won. I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, that's true. Charles and Lando on the podium. The dream.
That was a good question, actually. I don't see why not, because there's a lot of pressure, isn't there? When one of the beautiful things about this season of F1 is we can hear Michael Massey's conversations, and my God, he is sassy. I like him. But as soon as you get an incident like that, you're going to get pressure to dish out a penalty from one side, or both sides, actually. I think Toto was kind of pushing to say that was Max's fault. And so then do you give Max a penalty, even though he ended up in the barrier? Probably not.
Yeah. It was quite dramatic hearing both teams rigging Michael and being like, have you seen this? He turned in. Have you checked your emails? What's going on?
That's great.
It was bizarre. But there has been... I don't remember a crash or an incident like this that's caused as much kind of bubbling around. So like everyone's obviously losing their minds on Twitter and so staunchly in one corner or the other. And then there's like reports that Red Bull have hired lawyers to look into the incident.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I don't know what they're going to do. Helmut Marko saying that Lewis needs a ban. And then Max has come out and said that Lewis is disrespectful and unsportsmanlike. It's quite an extreme response to an incident that everyone has thankfully walked away from fine.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. I'd say the last time that there was an incident that was this high profile and had title implications was probably Rosberg-Hamilton in Spain, where actually Verstappen went on to win his race. And that all happened behind closed doors. I'm sure there was a massive storm between them that Toto Wolff had to sort out. But we're actually getting to see this play out between two sides. And this is what happens when you have a decent title fight. It's happened throughout history in Formula One. We've just not seen it recently because there's always been a dominant car.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Red Bull have been on kind of a bit of a dominant streak, and this is a chink in their form. So they're obviously right to be disappointed.
Yeah.
But I feel like there comes a point when you need to draw a line under it and be like, right, all we can do is win Hungary.
Yeah. And I think there's nothing wrong in just walking away from it. Like Christian Horner was so incensed in his interview with Sky Sports, and I was just like, it's not a good look. Rumours going around that you're getting lawyers involved is not a good look. I don't think it's great for one of the title contenders for Max to be sending out tweets saying, it's not good sportsmanship. I think if you don't think it's good sportsmanship, you don't have to shout about it. No. Have a word and, be a sportsman and sort it out yourself. And then I saw an interview with Lewis as well. I don't think he gets off lightly. He did an interview where he said, I don't understand why Max has to be so aggressive. He's always so aggressive. And then about 40 seconds later in the same interview, he says, because, God, I'm never going to stop being aggressive. You'll never be able to stop me being aggressive. And it's like, well...
You can't,
You're not better,
double standards like that.
You can't be a hypocrite like that. You're the number one in the world at the moment, fine. But when you're out on track, you're the same as everyone else.
Yeah. And obviously, Max has kind of got a bit of a history of being quite an aggressive defender and an aggressive attacker and things. But at the moment, he's one of only 3 drivers that doesn't have any penalty points. Yeah.
He's had a really clean season.
Yeah. Yeah, which sort of does kind of show how far he's come along and how kind of ready he seems to win the championship this year.
Yeah.
I just hope this isn't... Obviously, it's kind of the end of their friendly rivalry. But I hope this doesn't bring about lots of dirty moves on track.
No. What I do think it will do, though, is if Lewis Hamilton wins the championship by anything less than 50 points, there's always going to be people that say Max should have won because he shouldn't have crashed in Azerbaijan when he was in the lead, and he should have scored some points in Silverstone, even if Lewis did get ahead of him. So there's always going to be that something in the back of it. It won't be in the history books, but when people talk about this season, I think Max is still the strongest driver.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's something that comes every time Lewis Hamilton wins a world championship. It's like, oh, he's only won because of the car. Oh, he's only won because he doesn't have a good rival. Oh, he's only won because Max crashed.
I thought you were going to say because everyone thought Valtteri Bottas should have won.
Well, I'm sure someone does. But yeah, so as we said, after the incident, it was red flagged. Lewis could fix his car. The incident was then under investigation. He was handed a 10-second penalty. And then we got going again with Charles Leclerc leading the pack. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited were you?
Oh, man. I went and got my hat. I put my hat on. I was very happy. I was content at that point. That's all I needed. I was scared, though, because I didn't know how long it was going to last. Boy, oh boy, did it last longer than I thought it was going to.
It lasted so much longer than I thought it was going to.
I wish it lasted shorter because it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, there came a point when it was like, he's got to do it. He's going to do it. And then you just saw the gap just decreasing lap by lap. Like Lewis made up like an 8-second deficit in the space of about 5 laps or something bonkers like that.
I mean, right, sometimes we have races like this where, The second place car is chasing down the first place car, and the gap's getting down. And then it all gets a little bit weird because they get to lap traffic, and then whoever's in first ends up just taking the win because the lap traffic gets in the way. And I was like, it's going to happen. Like, Charles has got lap traffic ahead. They'll get out of his way, create a little bit of a jam. It'll be fine. Why is it the 1 week it doesn't happen? The 1 week.
Yeah, it was tough.
Although, I think, again, as brilliant as a weekend it was for Ferrari, they've kind of thrown it away a bit. Because have you seen what the rumour is why... So Charles's engine started cutting out every now and again. I'm not sure if this is true. Apparently, they didn't fuel his car sufficiently.
Oh, God.
So it wasn't receiving enough fuel when it was doing certain upshifts.
Imagine if he'd run out of fuel before the end.
No, I don't want to imagine that.
Which actually was a suggestion I saw for how to mix up sprint races. Make it like a Formula E format, where you give them a time limit and a set amount of fuel, rather than a lap limit.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
Can't remember where I saw that. Someone on Twitter came up with that idea. Credit to them.
Although there's so many engineers. And again, so do Formula E, and that always goes tits up, doesn't it?
But yeah, so it was kind of heartbreaking for Charles. The other one was Lando Norris, who looked like set to have a podium for probably like 15 laps or so, and then had a 6.2 second pit stop or something like that.
Yeah.
Which sort of pushed him just off the steps. Imagine Lando and Charles on the podium at Silverstone. That would have been...
You know what? I'm glad it didn't happen, because it will happen next year when I'm there.
Excellent.
Blessing in disguise.
What did you think to the rest of the race after we'd had all the action of the first lap?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think it was that interesting.
Yeah.
It was a little bit boring. I think it benefited from having so much controversy to talk about.
Yeah.
It had its big moment.
And I think it benefited from Lewis having that 10-second penalty.
Yes.
Because he has a way of fighting back through the pack, which is always exciting to watch.
Do you think the midfield drivers don't put up enough of a fight when they see Lewis Hamilton in their mirrors? Or do you think they should put up more of a fight?
I don't know. I guess because Mercedes have been so dominant, maybe they're always just a bit like, oh, well, there's just no point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's inevitable.
But then, like, in Austria, Lando was putting up quite a good defence to Lewis. Kept him behind for quite a few laps. So, maybe not so much anymore. But he did make it look quite easy getting past.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe that's like a quality of Silverstone. It is like quite a nice open circuit where there's lots of places to get a nice slipstream, get a nice overtake, some stuff.
I think it's kind of a shame. I mean, I totally agree with the 10-second penalty, but had it been a stop-go penalty, he would have had to take it so much earlier and would have dropped so much further down the pack that it would have made it more of a challenge.
I still think he'd have done it, though. If he'd had... Because if it's a stop-go, don't you have to take it like within 3 laps?
Yeah, that's what happened at Monza last year.
Yeah, so he'd have had like 40 laps to make it back.
Yeah, but he had 40 laps to make up. Well, that's true.
Whereas he only had like 11 laps to make back 10 seconds.
Yeah, but he pushed the gap so he had less cars to overtake.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't think it was worthy of a stop-go, though. So.
No, maybe not. But this is the thing about this race. We can't stop talking about Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen because not a lot else happened.
No. Perez had a stinker, though. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, it was rubbish.
Yep. What did you think about Red Bull's decision to pit him to take away the fastest lap point? Because he was in 10th, so he would have got a point. So why have they thought it's better for him not to get a point and take away from Mercedes than for him to get a point? Because surely it's the same.
It's also taken away from Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, that's true. So he's not cutting his driver's lead.
And I guess Perez was still fighting with other cars around him, so there was a chance he could have lost that 10th place, whereas you put him on a new set, he's guaranteed to get the fastest lap. Whereas it wasn't dead set that he was going to get 10th. No. Yeah, -1 for Mercedes and Hamilton. -1 for Perez. -1 for Hamilton is better than a +1 for Perez in Red Bull's eyes. Yeah, okay. I thought it was, if clearly Perez is happy with that. I mean, he's just happy to be here this year, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's managed to get
a
race win.
I thought he'd picked up a puncture or something, because he had his little battles with Raikkonen. So I thought he'd got a puncture and that's why he was going in. But then afterwards, in sort of the analysis, everyone was like, oh yeah, he went to try and get fastest lap.
Well, that was the thing. That little fight with Raikkonen. What was Kimi doing?
I don't know.
It's tight. I mean, he's annoying me this year because I think he's just having the final dance, isn't he, before he leaves?
Yeah. Apparently, Gasly picked up a puncture because of debris from their little tussle. So he then dropped out the points.
Brilliant.
So it's just, should they have got penalties? Who knows?
I don't know. I don't think it's worth of a penalty, but
no,
I guess this is actually kind of what we were just talking about. Like, if a Red Bull comes up behind an Alfa Romeo, should the Alfa Romeo put up a fight? Yeah, I think he's entitled to. I think he should, but I don't think that was putting up a fight. I think that was being a little bit naughty, where he squeezed him in Luffield, I think it was.
But that was the other thing. It was another race where you sort of didn't really see much of anyone other than the top sort of four. They kind of popped up in the little side windows, but there wasn't. You had Vettel's spin.
Yeah, but at least the fight at the top was actually worth watching.
Yeah.
We didn't see, and I mean, this is a spoiler for my sentence later. Nikita Mazepin beat Mick Schumacher for the second time this season, but the first time on pace.
Have you seen his move?
No.
It's quite good. You see him line it up the corner before, and then he turns in a little bit tighter, and then goes wide, so he's just got a better line into the next corner, and he just has him down the inside. The guy's not a great human being, but
maybe this is a turning point.
I don't think it is. But it was it was a nice move. But I'm hoping Mick wins every other,
race.
Comes ahead of him in every other.
He wins every other race, yeah.
Yeah, he wins everything.
Thank you for joining us for our British Grand Prix review episode. If you like this episode, hit the thumbs up, like this video, subscribe. You can also head over to the description where you'll find a link to listen to the fuller version of this podcast on Spotify, Acast, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. We're there. We're the best podcast called Friday Formula on the internet. We haven't spoken about our fantasy Formula 1 team recently. Maybe we'll leave that until after the Hungarian race when we're at the midpoint of the season. But spoiler alert, I think we're both doing terribly. You can join and compound that loss by using the code in the description of this video as well. If you want to feel good about yourself, I highly recommend it. You can follow us on Twitter. Owen was all over the live tweeting of the British Grand Prix. At Friday Formula is the handle you need from that. You can also follow us individually. I'm at Will Longman, and Owen, if he can remember, is
at Owen_Bellwood.
Hey. And I think that's all the plugs. All that's left to say is thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again next Friday.